One thing that also will come up is, do you work well independently, and or are you more of a team player? And what I tell people here is, this is kind of a loaded question when you think about it. Actually, if you can answer the question, I'm actually both, that's probably to your benefit, and I'll tell you why. First of all, if you say you're a team player, that's a plus in the sense that obviously you're willing to cooperate, collaborate with others, again, use a flexibility factor in there. But at the same time, they may wonder, well, okay, does that mean you can't work on projects on yourself unless someone's kind of, goading you along, or other members of the team are encouraging you? Can you really work well and do those projects? Well, again, you flip it around, and if you say you work well independently, it means, well, yes, you can work well unsupervised. I can give you a project, you can run with it, go with it, but then they're going to wonder, well, how well are they going to be as far as part of a department? If I need to get a substitute at the reference desk, how well is that person going to respond to that? How well will they work if I need to bring in a group of individuals to form a task force? Are they willing to do that, work well with others? So what I would do is emphasize that you can do both jobs equally well. You can be a team player and you can work well independently, and that you should have to find a balance in your workplace. Because those questions, again, are going to come up. Again, I can't kind of encourage people enough to ask questions. You always want to ask questions there. So whether it's about the library, about the institution, come prepared. And in particular, it's not a bad idea to come prepared to ask questions about benefits, salary, other information that maybe wasn't clear on the job description. So for example, if it says minimum of $50,000 a year, well, you have no idea how high that goes. Not only that, but you also don't know if that institution has childcare on campus, if that's important to you. You don't know what kind of professional development money they might have to help you join associations or attend conferences. You may not know what kind of living expense, or not living, but moving expenses they'll pay if you have to move there. Those are all things you can ask, be prepared to ask at an interview. It's perfectly okay to ask those kinds of questions if it's not clear to you what's being offered. The other thing that you need to do is, if you're lucky enough to actually have a couple of offers come to you, you need to weigh in things like, does it cost you to pay for parking on campus or at your institution, versus you don't have to worry about that because you don't have a car and you take public transportation. It's not an issue. Or is there a requirement of the organization that you become involved professionally, join organizations and attend conferences? Well, if you get $500 a year from one institution that's going to pay you $52,000, yet the other institution will give you $3,000 to travel and go to conferences, but they're only paying $47,000 a year. If you do the math and look at the taxes, you might be better off, if you need to be professionally active, to take the lower pay, knowing that you're going to get a larger amount of money to subsidize your travel to professional conferences and meetings. So look at everything that's involved with the job before. Don't look at just the dollar for the salary. Look at everything that might cost money, every factor that's important to you before you make those decisions. I think there's a couple of things. One is that obviously they can't tell you that, well, we're going to, if we hire you, you're going to make a salary of $60,000, unless very specifically in the ad it just says salary $45,000, cut and dried. There's no leeway there, there's no wiggle room. But in general, if there's things that are related to money, as far as at the interview, if you want to know about how much it costs for parking, or what kind of subsidization typically do you give for people who are involved professionally, those kinds of things, those aspects of money or costs are perfectly okay. I think what they really want to do is say, don't say, well, I'm not going to go work for you unless you give me at least $65,000 a year. I mean, they don't want to hear that kind of a message. But I think in general, you can ask some of those kind of very directed questions that deal with specifically the elements that I kind of highlighted earlier, like childcare, like transportation, like professional development funding, those kinds of things. So. Another thing that kind of frustrates people, especially in the academic library world, is that it takes a long time sometimes before you hear back. It may take 2 to 3 months by the time you send in your application to even hear back from them to say, yes, we're interested in interviewing you, or yes, we're going to ask for letters of reference from your references. In academia, typically these are done by committee. You have to rely on all the people to be around to meet to form a committee. People, again, are traveling, they have conferences, vacations. It just takes a long time. It can be 6 months before you actually apply and then hear the results of a search. Even after you interview, it may take 2 to 3 weeks because they have to wait for other candidates to be available. Or if you're not the first candidate of choice, the first candidate may have said to the employer, well, I'd like a week to kind of sleep on it, or talk it over and figure out what I want to do. So that, again, that draws out the process. So don't get frustrated by that. Especially in academia, it's kind of a reality that the search process takes a lot longer than it would necessarily in a public or in a corporate library setting. What I would say to that is that in your cover letter, state, I will be graduating in June 2007 from the San Jose State Library Information Science program, or I'm expected to graduate. That way they know that yes, by the time the job opens up in July, or let's say the following fall, that yes, you'll have your degree, and then yes, you'll be ready to go. So they know that you're serious. They know that you'll be qualified as far as by the time that goes. So absolutely, even if you don't have the degree yet, I think it's okay to project out that 6 months and just state in the cover letter exactly what's going on. Again, that you're about to get the degree in the near future, and you'd like to be considered for the position. So, but that's a good question, absolutely, early on. The other thing about academic positions is typically they're going to want you to start right before the semester starts. So either right in the beginning of January or right before school starts, so let's say August. So kind of keep that in mind if you're interested in academic librarians. Librarianship, typically that's the window that you're looking at as far as when they'd like to hire. So that's why you see a lot of times in the late winter, early spring, a lot of positions open up because they'd like to be able to finish interviewing people, maybe even talking to people at ALA Annual, and then by the time they decide who they want and the person can get there, they're just in time to start the fall semester at the institution. So, and basically that's a lot of the tips that I'd have. I'd really like to kind of get some more questions from you and kind of more of a dialogue here as far as I've been talking at you for about, for a while now. I'd like to really kind of get more feedback from all of you. So. What I would say is use things like your internship to see if they'll count that as part of the work experience. It may be that for those particular jobs, you're going to need to either be part of a temporary library pool or, again, do some work to kind of get that experience before you're eligible for some of those positions. So also reread the job description to make sure that's not just a desired versus a required part of the credentials of the person coming in. So it may just be they prefer somebody who has work experience, but it may not necessarily actually be a requirement going in. But I do realize, having seen some of the job descriptions coming out for entry-level librarians, I always wonder when I see entry-level librarian in the title, and then down below it says, at least 2 years experience. I'm like, well, that's not really an entry-level librarian, And so I do feel for the students coming in sometimes, you're kind of caught in the middle there where they want this experience, yet they're telling you, well, this is an entry-level experience. So see if they'll count things like doing internships or even volunteer work. If you've got the time, I've had several former interns at my library who've actually extended their time to do internships. So, for example, they could get more experience teaching. So they could get more experience doing research consultation or using some of the technologies. And we've used them as volunteers in that sense. So they've been able to add that to their resume as far as work experience, even though it's not paid work experience necessarily. So see if you can kind of work some of those angles. It certainly can't hurt. I think if you can work into your internship a way that you can participate in instruction, whether it's starting out observing and then maybe doing part of an instruction session, like showing how to use the catalog to a freshman English class, those kinds of things. That's one thing they don't do very well, I think, in library school still, is to teach you how to be a teacher. That's something I think it still kind of lacks overall in the coursework. You really just have to kind of get your feet wet and kind of do it before you know exactly how good or an effective instructor you're going to be. So yes, having the knowledge, the coursework is good, but even more so, see if you can't get that practical experience somewhere, like through an internship or another way where you can maybe team teach with somebody to get an experience, especially if you work at it or go to school here at San Jose State. See if there's a librarian who's willing to say, to work with you to say, yes, come along with me to my instruction session and I'll let you, do this part of it to, again, get your feet wet and kind of get you that experience. So I highly recommend, if you have the opportunity to do any kind of instruction, if you're going to go into academic librarianship, I would recommend it highly to get that experience if you can. One of the things is to follow up right away within, let's say, 2 to 3 days of getting home, just saying, it was really a pleasure to meet you. I hope to see you again at a future conference. Or you might remember something about that. And in fact, what I would recommend you do is if they give you, typically it's an exchange of business cards, so they're going to give you their business card. On the back of it, just write a little note saying why you want to keep in touch with this person, whether it's a future job coming up, or it's a technology they're using, or they have something very unique at your library that you're interested in. And then that's kind of a launching off point to kind of talk with them and kind of get more involved. So you have to kind of, there's a little bit of learning how to schmooze here and there when you go to the conferences. Especially you may feel a little bit uneasy if you aren't used to networking with professionals or other people. But after you kind of get the hang of it and you realize that you've got things in common, either interests, you're using the same technology at your library, those kinds of questions, you can kind of build upon that rapport and really take advantage of some of those networking opportunities. I think that for a lot of people, they get their foot in the door, at least into the interview process in a lot of jobs because they know somebody. They know somebody at the institution, or they know somebody who knows somebody very closely at the institution that, again, can put in a good word for them and get them kind of a step up on others who might be applying for the same position. So make sure you take advantage of those networking opportunities. I think in the urban areas, it's pretty tough as far as around Los Angeles, around the San Jose, San Francisco area. I think as you get out into some of the less populated areas, there are more positions that maybe you've got less of a pool of people applying for. So if you're willing to move out to the desert, or if you're willing to move out to part of Northern California that's more rural, that has a position, you may not have as many people competing for those positions. So I think in general, when you want to stay close to the urban areas, you're going to have more competition. And it also makes sense as far as when you look to see where the library programs are, well, they're in San Jose, they're in Los Angeles, they're down at Fullerton, and now even Northridge is thinking of launching an MLS program. So again, it's around the urban area. So people who just come out of library school, they don't want to move, they're just kind of set. Obviously, they're going to be looking for jobs in that area. So yeah, the competition's definitely could be a lot a lot more intense around those urban areas of California. I would say if you can get away with 2 pages or less, that's ideal. Because again, after 2 pages, especially some jobs, they have literally hundreds of applicants for positions. After 2 pages, it's going to be a blur. You want to put in those first 2 pages the highlights. So if there's a course that you really want them to know about, mention it in your cover letter, saying, If it's an archives position that you're interested in, or it's a public library position you're interested in, mention that. Say, I took the course in this, or I took 3 courses in this area, to let them know that, yes, now I've got the kind of the subject, kind of the more school knowledge on this topic, but don't mention it necessarily in the resume. Just leave that strictly to your degrees, your job work experience, any awards that you might have had, especially awards that relate to your time in library school, or even as an undergrad, that would be important. Any professional associations you belong to. So if you're a student member of ALA, or CARL, or SLA, or any of the other groups, include that at the end of your resume. And in addition, don't wait for don't say, references upon request. Most of the time in the job description, they'll tell you, please submit the names of 3 or 4 or 5 people. So don't ever send in a cover letter resume without those references. If they've asked to include 3, don't say references on request. Submit them as a separate attachment page, and make sure that the information there is current. That's another problem we've had sometimes, is that they've listed the personal contact phone for their reference and not their work phone, and we've called and the number's changed. So make sure if the person's not using a work address, that you make sure that information's up to date. I think it's always good protocol to send a thank you note to those involved. And it might just be to the member, the chair of the search committee, and have it routed and tell them, please tell the members of the search committee that I enjoyed my interview. I'm really interested in the position still. Please contact me if you have any other questions. Again, let them know that you're interested. But I think it's just a common courtesy to go ahead and send them a card. Also, send it in paper. Don't send them an electronic one. It looks very tacky. Even though we're in this age of technology, there's something about that paper thank you note, especially if it's on a nice card stock, they're really going to appreciate that. So I would say absolutely that's something that you should do. I would say that it should be more of a personal letter at this point, because they've already seen your cover letter, they've already seen your resume, they kind of know what you can do, they've already interviewed you. If you want to kind of re-emphasize the fact that you're really interested in the position.